Hello, I am Paula Bennett and welcome to my New Zealand Herald podcast, Ask Me Anything. Now, one thing I've learnt in life is it's never too late to learn something new. So on this podcast, I talk to people from all walks of life to hear about how they got to where they are and get some advice and guidance on some of life's biggest questions. Today, a real gem of a guest for you. I am joined by Reverend Frank Ritchie. Frank is an ordained minister of the Wesleyan Methodist Church of New Zealand, a chaplain, broadcaster, and all-round good guy. Frank, thanks for helping me there. Thanks for joining us.
Look, I'll take the good guy compliment any day of the week. So clearly you and I need to hang out more if you're going to talk like that.
Yeah. I do think we might have a little bit in common, though, that we do try and see the good in people and try and make them feel better about themselves.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's desperately needed in the time that we find ourselves in, where the division and I think the demonization of those who are different from us in particular is entrenched. I think those who have the ability or the fortitude, I think, to look at others and look for the good, find the commonality, I think are really important.
Yeah.
And having gone through some of the episodes of your podcast, Paula, you've sat down with people, I think, who would differ from where people might have placed you politically. So I think it's a good thing.
But doesn't that make life more interesting? I mean, how boring if we all just had the same thoughts and have had the same experiences. Now, you can tell that I'm interviewing a broadcaster, right? Because he launches right in there and gets his points, which we absolutely love. But you'll have heard my rules. So my rules for the podcast, which is just fits with what we were just saying, which is I'm allowed to ask you anything, but you don't have to answer. And the other one is we call it the safe space, which is what we were just talking about, and it's the sort of no judgment zone, right?
Yeah, I'm totally happy to follow those rules.
Yeah. Okay, quick fire if you like. If you could invite anyone to dinner, alive or dead, who would it be?
Oh, well, obviously Jesus foremost, but of course then I heard my friend Petra Bagast. I read her in an interview in Dish recently get asked that question. She said Jesus, but then those of us who hold to a Christian faith have to then say, but we kind of have Jesus at every single meal. So Jesus would be up there. I think I'd want Bono because Bono for me is a wonderful contradiction of a whole number of things, and I love people who seem to manage to hold contradiction and paradox together. So I think I'd want Bono. Gandhi, these are all kind of obvious, aren't they? Gandhi, because again, a different religion, a different perspective, but many things in common. So I'd want to explore those commonalities. I think I'd want Caesar Augustus at the table as well.
Yeah.
Again, because vastly different worldview from a world that was pre-Christian. So it wasn't influenced by anything related to my faith. So I imagine his perspective would be totally different. And maybe stick Brutus at the table as well, so that if things get out of hand, he can just
sort of
get Caesar in the back.
Do you think Jesus would be chatty?
I think Jesus would be wild. People, I thought
he'd be more contemplating and... No.
No, as someone who's very familiar with the Gospels, I think we have this image of Jesus as this kind of serene figure. And I think there's elements where he is. But if you actually look at Jesus interacting with people, there's people that he's very open to and he's got all the time in the world for. And then there's others that he's wild with. The guy hardly ever actually answers a question when he's asked a question. He's always got something else to throw on the table. There's times where his disciples get really confused. They have no idea what's going on. So I think he'd be unpredictable and probably rattle a few cages at that table.
I like that. I was the Minister of Youth Affairs, as it was called then, for a while, and it was an absolute pleasure because you can imagine you'd go along and you'd do visits, and I turned up slightly late and these teachers and parents were waiting outside for me and they were like, it's okay, the kids are so excited to see you. And I was like, well, I think they'd be excited to see an All Black or they'd be excited to see a pop star. I'm not sure they're that excited to see a politician, but it's very nice of you to say so. So I go inside and I give give my bit of a spiel, and then I said, are there any questions? And, the teacher literally elbows the kid sitting, and this 12-year-old gorgeous Samoan boy stands up and he goes, oh, can I ask you anything? And I went, sure you can, going, oh my goodness. And he says, what did Jesus do as a teenager?
Wow, good question.
I know. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I'm in my head, I'm going, oh, he went walkabout for a while there. And then, I'm trying to remember my Sunday school that I probably wasn't that attentive of. And I'm literally racking my brain. And then I looked at him and I went, oh, wrong minister. It's a true story.
Really good. That is really good. I can understand why he asked the question, and you did well to eventually go there.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you know what Jesus did as a teenager?
No, and I think it's really good that we don't know. I mean, there's that time when he was young where, as you mentioned, he skived off and was found at the temple by his parents. But then there's this whole period where things just go quiet and he's just doing life. And I like that. Yeah.
We're going to talk about caring for your daughter, Seela, and her illness and the lengths your family have gone to, for her in the second half of this podcast. But I think, we're sort of talking religion and it fascinates me. Do you think we are getting less religious as a people at the moment? Or do you think just with all the crisis that's going on in the world, it feels like actually, I might have said that a couple of years ago, but I feel like we're getting all a bit more spiritual again?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I know that in circles of organized religion, we get dismayed every time the census results come out, because clearly people are disaffiliating from organized religion. But the research away from the census, there's some good research that shows actually we're a highly spiritual nation. So we're disaffiliating from kind of the older organized religions like Christianity. People aren't necessarily coming along to church. But that doesn't mean we've lost the sense that there's a bigger world beyond our five senses, that there's more to this, and we want something more to this. And in my work as a chaplain for media personnel, I discover that all the time. People really want and they're hungry for spiritual conversations. So I think that's entirely there. I think the challenge is for people like myself just to be able to speak to that, to not be threatened by it, to not think it's my job to convince everybody to come into my church, but to meet people right where they're at, hear what questions and wonderings they have spiritually, and then think about how maybe my faith could be a gift into that space for them. So I think we're highly spiritual. And I think you're right. When you hit times of crisis, I think the most common prayers are thank you, help, and wow. And I think when we're in times of crisis, I think most of us lean into that somehow, in some way, shape, or form.
And I suppose in your role as a broadcaster, and you're doing, your talk back, that's a way of kind of reaching in that's beyond, as you say, the organised religion of turning up to church every Sunday at a given time. Is it?
Yeah, I think everybody who tunes into my show on News Talk ZB on Sunday evenings at 6:00, award-pending radio.
Good.
I think everybody knows that they're listening to a minister, but usually we're not talking spiritual stuff. Myself and my co-host Jack's are big fans of food, so we try to talk about food every now and then. But the deeper stuff does come up, and people know that if the deeper stuff does come up, we're a safe place to be able to talk about that stuff as well. And people who are listening to Talkback are often not people who are just going to walk into my church on a Sunday, but hopefully I feel like someone they might be able to sit down and have a beer with and chew the fat about that deeper stuff.
Is it healthy that we're now such a multicultural society and that we are influenced by sort of so many different religions and different gods and beliefs?
Yeah, I think it can be healthy, depending on going back to the start of our conversation, whether we have that inclination to view the good and find the good in others. So I know that my Muslim friends, for instance, I know that when we sit down, we know exactly how we're different. We don't need to have those arguments. What's really interesting is where we have stuff in common. That's the stuff that I want to be able to explore. And I know that I can learn from them and they can learn from me. So if we're willing to humble ourselves a little, to listen to each other, to ask questions, to be curious and to explore, I think a very diverse nation can be a really healthy thing. But if we don't have that, if it's just about division and pushing away those who are different from us and feeling threatened, then we can get ourselves into a lot of problems. And I think particularly online, you can see a lot of that at the moment.
But I feel like that's a bit of where society feels like it's at the moment, and that we're talking so much more about our differences and what we don't have in common, and instead of actually recognising what we do have in common. And those are pretty easy to find if you're a New Zealander or and you're living here. It's like, well, surely we all agree that we love this country, and surely we all agree that actually the happier and healthier that people are, then the better off we all are. And if we found those things and talked about the commonalities instead of the differences that divide us, then surely we would be happier and healthier as a nation.
Yeah, I think so. I wonder too, and I'm exploring this a little bit at the moment, how different it is between what we perceive to be the reality when we spend a lot of our time online versus what it's actually like to sit down with people. People are very different in person than they are online. I think people are quicker to rage online. So if we gain our perception of reality by what's going on online, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or wherever, I think it's going to warp our sense of reality and how good people really are and how much people really want to get along and how much they're really mostly just concerned about putting food on the table, getting the kids a good education. I think if you sit down with people in person when we're different, I think our perception of reality is quite different.
And you spend quite a bit of time on social media, right? And try and spread the positive word. Are you just trying to combat some of that negativity?
I wouldn't say I'm trying to combat it or that there's any intention to spread something different. Hopefully it's just an extension of who I am. But I'm very aware too that when I'm online, it would be very easy to dive into the rage and just participate in it, especially since that's the stuff that people hit like on. So the dopamine hits from spreading the rage are really high. So I'm conscious that I could easily fall into that. But I would just say I hope that what people see online is just an extension of who I actually am. But I'm starting to realize I probably spend a little too much time online.
It's interesting. People would often say to me, I would never do your job when I was, when I was a minister. And I would say to them, that's because you're looking online. Actually, the people I meet face to face on a daily basis are just extraordinary and kind and generous. And it's extremely rare to have, something negative. You're just reading that nasty stuff.
Well, I would imagine for you, if you, especially in your political years, had spent all your time online, I would imagine that would have just eaten you alive.
I'd have been nuts. I mean, I was always a little bit nuts, and I hope I still am, but that would not have been good for my mental health at all. I'm going through something at the moment where I got completely hacked into my Facebook, and they've taken it over, and I can't get it back right now. And it's actually been really healthy. So I'm very seldom on Twitter anyway, and so I now don't have Facebook. And it's been about 2 or 3 weeks, and I've got to say I'm not really missing it.
Yeah, which if we think about the bigger picture of people's mental health, that says something, doesn't it? I mean, I've seen graphs that track, especially among young people, rates of depression and loneliness and anxiety, and they correspond almost directly with the rise of the use of the smartphone and tracking how many real interactions with friends and peers teenagers are having during the week, how that's completely dropped off. But their online world is so much bigger. I think we need to spend some real time thinking about that and addressing it.
Hey, the Media Chaplaincy. I mean, we actually had a Parliament chaplain when I was in there. Yeah. And so I do kind of get what his role was at that time, which was just checking in with us, really, and being a safe space. Is that what it is for media, for journalists?
Yeah, pretty much. We started it at a time where I think it was TV3 at the time. Their newsroom was being ripped apart, and we couldn't see any real care for people in the industry. But as all of us who are involved in media in some way, and we believe media is important, and we want healthy media. Whatever people's perception of that idea at the moment, I think we all want healthy media, and you don't get healthy media unless you've got healthy people. So unless the people are being looked after, the news and the media are going to suffer. And since we couldn't see any care, myself and a couple of others sat down and went, as a church minister, and as a broadcaster, how could I fit in this space? What could we offer? And chaplaincy seemed like a really good model. We saw it in the Defence Forces, we saw it in hospitals. And so we thought injecting that type of care where people could just sit down with someone confidentially, chew the fat, put on the table whatever they want to talk about and know they're going to be listened to would be a really healthy thing. So we started that almost 10 years ago. So now we've been through some of our nation's biggest news alongside our journalists, and I'm very happy with what we've achieved. We've got a sizable team now, and times like this, I think it's really important.
And yeah, well, at times like this in particular, you were just saying troubles at TV3 Newsroom, and I was thinking, well, yeah, it's just even the last week, it's been absolutely awful for them. Do you think that being a journalist is a hard job?
Yes, I do. And again, putting aside what anybody might think about the media and stories and how stories get put out there, journalism is hard now. There's little job security, and I know it's the same across many industries, but this is the one that I personally serve and care about. There's little job security. There's so much abuse that comes through, and the research shows that many journalists have had to deal with verbal and sometimes physical abuse. So there's that goes on. There's little resource in the industry now, which is why all this stuff's shutting down. You've got people having to do more work with less resource. And I think the product suffers because of that. But of course, the journalists then suffer because of that as well. Yeah,
I agree. And at times they're also seeing people at their most vulnerable and at their worst, right?
Yeah.
And that's traumatic. There must be a degree of trauma that can be passed on to them as well.
Yeah, very much so. If you've got a young journalist, for instance, who is just starting out and has to go and do what would be called the death knock, where someone's just passed away and they need to go and see the family to get some information, that's a hard, traumatizing thing to do. Or I remember when the Christchurch shooting happened, I flew down to be there the next day to support journalists. And I remember doing my News Talk ZB show on that Sunday evening from the Christchurch studio. And I remember walking out of the studio at the end of the show, and there was a young guy sitting at his desk just looking shell-shocked. He was just doing his placement. He was studying, doing his placement, and the Christchurch shooting was the first thing he had to do. And I just remember looking at him. He was almost in tears when I asked the question, "How are you?" That's mind-blowing that someone so young would have to deal with that. So knowing that there's someone in that space who maybe can ask how you're doing, I think is good.
Okay, I liked one before we go to the break and then come back and talk about you and your family. If you are interested in kind of exploring spirituality more, how do you choose a religion?
That's a very good question. I've never been asked that question before because, of course, I'd want to just offer people what it is that I have. I think curiosity, look around, find people within each of the spaces that you might be curious about and ask them questions. My hope would be, and this is me being idealistic, that if you've got an interest in Christianity, you'd be able to find someone that you can talk to easily who you trust. Same if you're interested in Islam, Buddhism, Māori spirituality, anything. My hope is that you could find places where you could ask questions over a beer or whatever is most appropriate since Muslims can't drink, and be able to have those conversations.
Yeah, and as you say, be curious and explore it for yourself and take that bit of time to look into yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, when we come back, we are going to talk about what it's probably fair to say has been one of the biggest challenges of your life. Let's come back soon. Right, welcome back. And in this segment, we are going to get some key advice on caring for an ill family member and advocating for them. Frank, you and your family have recently undergone a huge challenge with your daughter Sela's health. She was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, is that right? EDS?
Yep.
Yeah,
yep, that's correct.
So talk me through what that is and how it's affecting her.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked because there are families around the country who are just going through the ringer over this issue. So the chance to be able to talk about it and raise any awareness, I think, is a real gift and valuable. So my daughter, for many years, has had abdominal issues. She's had issues with her stomach, usually nothing overly major, but there's always been something present. Earlier last year, she had her appendix out. And on the part of the medical system, it was kind of guesswork. Looking back, I don't think it necessarily had to be taken out. And then a few months after that, she started having quite strong abdominal pain when she would eat, and it just started getting worse and worse and worse. So we went to the hospital, sat for hours and hours, as many people will be familiar with, in the emergency departments to try and get her seen. The system under pressure had difficulty trying to work it out. The first assumptions were it might be a virus, which is a perfectly reasonable assumption. So go home and see if it'll work out. It continued. It kept getting worse. And so our GP ultimately ended up having us go and see a gastroenterologist. And so from there, because we have private health insurance, we're able to get a CT scan. They discovered something structural. She had an obstruction on her, the start of her small intestine, which was meaning that food could not pass through as it should. And then that ultimately escalated into discovering that she has something known as Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder. And for her, that had resulted in some vascular compressions. So because her veins aren't overly strong, they'd become compressed in places and blood was struggling to flow as it should. And that ultimately ended up with us going to Germany to have an operation because it can't be done here.
And, we've been reading, and the Herald has, I think, done an amazing job in highlighting people's cases of late. And for a lot of them, they weren't believed in their symptoms, were they? So, I mean, I'm not going to say you're lucky, but I am going to say thank goodness for those health professionals that took you seriously and did the right tests that got you in the right place.
Yeah, we were extremely fortunate in that the gastroenterologist that we happened to be referred to had just seen the file of another case, and my daughter's symptoms looked very similar. So very quickly she put on the table that it was a possibility, and then we were able to get scans to affirm that. And then once we'd determined that we didn't need to go to Germany, after trying to work through the system here as much as we could in a short space of time, the support that rolled in for us was phenomenal. There were probably a good 1,500 people who helped us out financially to be able to make that happen. It's huge.
New Zealanders are amazing. Eh?
Yeah, they are. But I really feel for those families who haven't had the good fortune that we've have had to face their young people being diagnosed with psychosomatic disorders. I think our medical system, and I know it's under pressure, but I think we need to put the psychosomatic diagnosis aside, and it should be an extreme last resort. I think we need to recognize that if someone's feeling abdominal pain, particularly young women, their systems are complicated. Yeah. And it's very clear that we don't understand them very well. And so more work needs to be done.
How old is she?
She's 17.
And when did you travel to Germany for the operation?
January. So she had the operation on January 9. We flew out of New Zealand on December 29. We landed, it's only weeks ago now, we landed back on February 15. So it's all still very, very fresh.
Yeah, and how is she?
Oh, phenomenal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, way ahead of where we thought she was going to be. Her body still has a long way to come back from the starvation and the malnutrition of not being able to consume food properly. But she is doing really well. And when I look at, again, how others who have been over and had the operation, how their recovery has been on coming back, a lot of them have struggled. And the biggest difference I can see is just time. We had it done in a matter of months from the time that symptoms really started showing, whereas others have had to battle for years, which isn't going to help their system or their recovery.
So why Germany? Why can't we do it here?
I think ultimately we'll be able to do it here. But it is controversial here. There are some people who don't even believe that it's a real issue. Even the Ehlers-Danlos is poorly understood, let alone the abdominal vascular compressions. And people can present with abdominal vascular compressions and be asymptomatic. So there's a lot of discussion and argument around how real the issue is. Whereas there's a surgical team in Germany that recognize it as a real issue and have done this operation plenty of times. They have a specialization in doing the operation for people who have Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. So Germany seemed like the safest route and the best route to take and the cheapest route. You can get it done in the United States, but the waiting lists are a lot longer and it's going to cost a lot more.
So talk to me about being, about you and your wife and advocating for your daughter. Because, I always used to say it with younger children and families that perhaps didn't have the education or feel empowered enough to actually stand up for themselves and their children, and how they can get completely lost in a system. So the advice that we would give to people that find themselves in a system, as you indicated, that is overrun, that's probably underfunded, that is really struggling with good people, and yet you want your daughter seen and you want the best possible care that you can get. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a sad reality that those who agitate seem to be the ones who are able to get what they need. And I like to be a really polite guy. I like to be the one who doesn't rattle the cage. But I found out very quickly that in order to get what my daughter needed, I needed to rage a little. And I hate using that word, but I needed to rage a little. I needed to take sometimes the rage that I was feeling, know how to control it, and use it to get what she needed, even if that meant I got looked at as a bad guy. Now, I say that as a middle-class, white, middle-aged male. And I know that I'm going to be listened to. I know that when I push, I expect that people are going to take notice and hear what it is that I'm asking for. And like you, that leaves me very concerned about people who are from cultures or ways of being or backgrounds that leave them quiet in the face of that need. So I think there are so many people around the country who are probably suffering who could really benefit from having someone beat the drum for them.
Yeah.
And it's sad, but it's where our medical system is at the moment.
Well, I was also just thinking about those patients and those people that have got the syndrome and they're not being believed. And so imagine their frustration and rage, but then the more frustrated and angry they sound, it probably just confirms the diagnosis of some kind of mental illness or psychosomatic instead of actually recognising that they're not being listened to.
Yeah, there are mothers dealing with people, young daughters, much like my own daughter, who have had to rage and push and cause issues. And I know that they're getting looked at like they're just being frantic, that they're a little bit crazy. And in some cases, they're the ones being blamed for their children's issues. Again, it's a bias of the medical system. And it's not just our medical system, it's somewhat global to a degree. I think in particular, women are looked at as being a little crazy when it comes to advocating around these sort of things. And I think we need to be aware of that bias and address it.
And do you think it's particularly when it's something like this that does lead to weight loss that could be perceived instead to be some form of eating disorder and not the fact that you've actually got a medical problem that's preventing you from being able to get the nutrition and the food that you need?
Yeah, I mean, when I understand why the question was asked, but when we got assessed by two vascular surgeons at Waikato Hospital, they both ended up coming to the same conclusion and encouraged us to go to Germany. But we spoke to one of them, and at one point he removed my daughter from the room, which he probably shouldn't have done as a 17-year-old. She's fully in control of her own medical journey by then. And then he asked us the question, do you have any concerns about an eating disorder? And I said, up until this point, no other medical professional who's seen her has put that on the table. And if that goes anywhere near the report, we will have to have a conversation. But the fact that it's even an inkling, I think is problematic, and particularly for young women, I think it's seen as an issue. But my daughter and most of the other young girls that I know of who are going through this, all of them have been good eaters, living healthy physical lives until those symptoms hit. And then when those symptoms have hit, something has shifted. They all share that in common. So I think that commonality in and of itself points to the fact that the eating disorder idea for many of these young people needs to be taken off the table.
And you indicated it before that there are, 1,500 wonderful New Zealanders or people around the world that help fund you. But you would have had to have funded a lot yourself, I imagine. And you did apply for funding and didn't get the criteria. Is that right, what I read?
Yeah. No, we didn't end up. We initially funded a bunch ourselves, but people were so generous that all of that has come back. So we haven't had to extend our mortgage, but I know others who have gone and had the surgery and had to sell their homes. They just haven't seen the kind of support that we managed to get. And yes, we did apply for funding. We could have got to Germany even sooner if we hadn't applied for that funding. And that funding is a process, and ultimately it didn't come through because the surgery ended up being deemed to be experimental from a New Zealand perspective, even though funding had been available and a couple of other people had been over with the funding previously.
And I think that's really important that we do put that out there, because a lot of people don't know about the fund. In fact, actually, some of the medical professionals don't know about the fund, so they can't even recommend that patients go and find it. And there is some question about whether or not a DHB could actually fund it themselves and through their own budget instead of a special fund, if they think it is going to obviously improve the life and save the life of a patient.
Yeah. So for those who aren't aware of the fund, it's called the High Cost Treatment Pool, and your medical team need to apply on your behalf. So we didn't apply. It was a vascular surgeon at Waikato Hospital who ultimately had to make that application. So if people aren't aware of it, High Cost Treatment Pool, and if what it covers is stuff that needs to be done elsewhere or comes at a great cost and the public system can't do it, but they deem there to be huge benefit. Now, I don't care where that money comes from, but obviously there are families who don't have the sort of resources that ultimately were made available to us, where that sort of funding is really important. So I would encourage our government, our system, to explore ways to see that through. Now, I know that we're in a bit of a crunch time economically, so putting that sort of thing on the table and advocating for that sort of thing right now is difficult, but couple of years, the economic situation is probably going to look different, and we might be in a different situation, so we need to be thinking about it now.
Yeah, we do. And there's never the right time, right? So we've just got to all keep, highlighting. And I think on that, I wanted to say thank you. And thank you to Celia in particular to allow her story to be told, because I do think it's so important for others out there that either don't know or are sitting there and not being believed. And it can feel pretty lonely, I imagine. And so you being able to talk about this and so openly, I think makes a huge difference. And that's why we're doing it.
Yeah, thank you. It's something that I'm working out in my head at the moment, because if I'm honest, the whole experience has come with a lot of trauma, and I recognize PTSD reactions to things in myself at the moment as we grapple with how big the last months have really been and the toll that they've taken. And I know that speaking publicly then comes with some pressures. As you'll know, everybody's going to have their opinion and trying to work out what's best to say and who to say it to, when you know that some people are just going to think you're crazy or wrong. That comes with some stuff. So I've got to be emotionally ready for that as well. So I appreciate those who have been through this already and have been raising their voices. And I'm very appreciative of the New Zealand Herald for banging on about this for years and telling so many people's stories.
Because, man, it must have been hard to watch you suffer. I mean, how do you as a parent see that and know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't just kind of overnight, was it? It was ongoing for you.
Yeah, and as you'll know, when your children are in pain, you want to take that on yourself. At any point, I would have loved to have taken that off her and just felt the pain myself. And then in Germany, especially during the couple of weeks directly following surgery, there were times where I fully second-guessed my decision or our decision as parents. I remember my wife got to stay in the clinic with her for the 2 weeks she was in. I stayed at a hotel really close by. And I remember, especially when the epidural was taken out that had been controlling the pain, and then the days following that being taken out where everything was just horrific as they rebalanced her pain medication orally. I remember going back to my hotel room, going into the bathroom and crying because I was just sitting there just crying because I wondered if we'd done the right thing. Like, what are we doing on the other side of the world? They've cut my daughter open and look at how she's doing. But now the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, but really tough to watch. And how do you look after yourself and each other and your wife? You know, she's in there watching all of this as well.
Yeah. We're all getting counselling now. we're tight as a family. I think the experience helped make us as a family. I would say that I already loved, respected, and admired my wife, but I would say that that's so much deeper and richer now. And I watched my daughter over the last months advocate for herself and find her voice as a 17-year-old. Watching her strength, her willingness to go through the hard things. I think she's well set up for life, and I deeply admire her too. But it'll be a process of working all that through, and so I value the ability to be able to get counselling as well.
Yeah. And so do you think how long till she's better? Because it's never going to completely repair, is it?
Yeah, so the Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, the underlying issue, that can never be fixed. All we've done is created the ability for her compressed veins to be able to open up and for blood to be able to flow properly, and for that compression on her small intestine to open up so that food can pass through properly. But there's always going to be the risk that another compression could appear or something else could happen. So I'll probably spend a few nervous years just waiting for maybe something to go wrong. But her recovery has been phenomenal. She's eating now without pain. She's putting on weight again. She's able to move and to exercise without her blood pressure plummeting and her heart racing. I'm really happy with where she's at.
Well, I mean, you're supposed to be giving the advice, but my advice is you just got to live it all, right? And you can't sit there and worry because she's getting well and she's going to be well, and then you guys just need to celebrate. She sounds like she's an extraordinary young woman that is going to play a significant part in the world, really.
Yeah, thanks, Paula. I appreciate that.
This is the part where you get to ask me something.
Yes.
I know.
I do.
It's called Ask Me Anything, but I do all the bloody asking. So here's your moment where you may turn the tables and ask me something.
Yeah, and again, feel free to answer or not. I'm not sure if the question is too big, but I'm interested in people who are in the public space, in the public eye all the time, and I'm just because it's my inclination, it's who I am. I'm really interested in their inner world. So I'm fascinated to know when the microphone's not on, when the journalists aren't asking questions, where the public isn't giving their opinion, when it's silent and it's quiet, how do you find your calm?
So I prefer to be alone.
Yeah.
Which is used to be really hard on family, because you can imagine you're away such a lot and everybody's taking such a lot of you that they want their peace. And I'm actually quite an introvert in the way of finding my peace is to sit in quiet and nature and calm. My happiest place is on the water. I say on, in or under. And I don't need my head underwater, but my ears underwater.
Yes.
I know that sounds, but we all know it, right? We always,
I totally get it.
Kids lie in the bath with their ears under the water. And it's because I always just feel your whole body cocoons and your head space is just in such a different place. Yes. So that for me is without, like, okay, here's the weird one. I can fall asleep floating in our swimming pool.
No, that makes perfect sense, which is why floating, and you go now pay good money to float in float tanks. It's why it's such a big deal.
Yeah, so, and that's without, I mean, no lilo, no nothing else. I'm very buoyant. We all have a special skill, Frank. Mine is floating. If that was in the Olympics, I might have had a shot, honestly.
When I asked the question, I was not expecting that answer, but I like that you're buoyant.
My husband will come home and find me literally asleep, lying in the swimming pool with my ears under the water, and I'm completely calm. So there you go.
I love it.
I'm slightly embarrassed. Yeah, that's good for you. A little bit of embarrassment, you say? Okay.
Totally.
Reverend Frank Ritchie, thanks so much for your time today. If people want more from you, so we've got the radio at 6 o'clock on Sundays, ZB.
Yeah. And if you search for me online, I'm very present online. But yeah, 6 o'clock Sundays on News Talk ZB. And if there are any media personnel listening in who want to sit down and have a chat, mediachaplaincy.nz.
Cool. And Ritchie is with a T. So we've got RITCHIE. So go and look for Frank and get in touch, I reckon. And that's it for another episode of Ask Me Anything. And you can get in touch with me by emailing askpaula@nzherald.co.nz. And just feel free to send me through your questions for the podcast or any thoughts you have. I love reading them. Now, I'm going to tell you can find me on all these things, but as I just indicated, I'm not on Facebook right now, but you can go to Instagram or you can go to LinkedIn. But just follow Ask Me Anything on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and you can read my weekly column in the Herald on Sunday. I'm Paula Bennett. Ask Me Anything. Goodbye.